Hello and very many thanks for joining us again on this edition of the program People, Politics and Power. I am Imoni Amarere. Across Africa today, democracy stands at a crossroads. From Cameroon to the Ivory Coast, Tanzania to Uganda, and right here in Nigeria, a quiet but disturbing transformation is taking place. One that threatens the very foundations of governance and people's power. It is called state capture, a situation where the machinery of the state is seized not by an invading army, but by a small group of political and economic elites who bend laws, institutions, and policies to serve their private interests. In Cameroon, power has remained concentrated in the same hands for decades, blurring the line between the state and the ruling party. In Ivory Coast, constitutional reforms have been used to extend incumbency, raising questions about the sanctity of term limits. Tanzania has seen tightening control over civil space and dissenting voices. Uganda presents a long-running case of institutional capture where opposition faces intimidation and power is perpetually recycled. Similar situations persist in Rwanda, Equatorial Guinea, Zimbabwe, and Togo, where state machinery is in the firm grip of a few powerful elites. And in Nigeria, the capture of key state institutions, from electoral bodies to the legislature and the judiciary, continues to threaten the ideals of transparency and accountability. These are not isolated developments. They point to a deeper crisis: the slow erosion of democratic norms, the weakening of checks and balances, and the shrinking space for civic participation. So we ask, what does state capture mean for the future of democracy in Africa? Can institutions, once compromised, ever regain independence? And how can citizens reclaim ownership of the state in the face of entrenched power? This is People, Politics and Power, where we put the people back at the center of governance and examine the forces that are shaping the continent's democratic destiny. And on the program today, I'm joined by Professor Akungbowa Brownwell Amadasun. He is a professor of public administration and political economy. He's a lecturer at the Federal University in Wukari. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
We expect to join us very shortly by Far Elvis Tayong. Mr. Tayong is a political analyst and is the publisher of the Investigator newspaper in Bua in Cameroon. He will be joining us virtually from that location, and we will be talking with him about the current situation in his home country of Cameroon. But let's proceed with Professor Akungbowa, who is right here with us. First, Prof, help us to understand what exactly state capture is. When you talk about state capture, what is it? How does it differ from, say, ordinary corruption and or bad governance?
Thanks so much. State capture actually has to do with when a few individuals who have their self-interest as against national interest seizes the policy instrument of the state, seizes the governance machinery as a whole, and of course, the last of it is to actually ensure that public treasury is manipulated to their interest. So, but usually when you talk about state capture, people look at it just basically from looting the treasury or cornering the whole financial system towards their own interest. But that is not it. Because before you can seize the financial system of a state, then you must seize the administrative instruments, because it is the administrative instrument that aids you to actually
That gives you access to.
to those funds, the treasury. Without that, you cannot. So it has to do with actually capturing the administrative system, the regulatory system, and even taking into, I mean, how do I put it now? That is actually ensuring that you act for the proxies, you act as a proxy to some powerful interest. Because usually within the African setting, the seizing of state structures, the capture of the state and its machineries, whether administrative, financial, and so on and so forth, must be perpetuated not within the internal ramifications alone, but it must also have the support of the external forces that seek to cripple the national system.
Now that you have talked about the external forces,
Yes.
what are those external forces that tend to aid state capture in many African countries?
One, there's what you call transactional governments. They are simply there, that is external government, particularly the Western world, which to a very great extent too has been joined by the former communist blocs. And by this I mean the socialist China and the Russia, socialist Russia. What they do here is that they have interest in your minerals. They have interest in your resources. And so they constitute the transactional countries. They are not there for the sake of ensuring that these African countries are developed. They are there for their interest, to sort out the resources and use it for the interest of their country. Then secondly, you have what we call the ruthless business class. They are not there for the sake of their government, but they are there to make profit for their businesses. And so now they constitute a force in the sense that when they come in, they look for opportunities and then look for the internal persons to use as an instrument for assessing those opportunities. And so that is why you must separate transactional government from transactional individuals. But they are related. They are related because within that same country, as long as they act in the interest of their own home country, the home country will not question them.
So what is the role of multilateral international agencies like the World Bank, like the World Bank and IMF and such
Yes.
other agencies?
Yes, that is a third class, the supranational agencies. They are there actually to foster the interest of the powerful nations in the world. Because if you look at what gave birth to the Bretton Woods conference, you will note, Bretton Woods institutions, you will understand that they were not actually put in place to serve the interest of Africa. They were there to serve the interest of the developed world, particularly after the Second World War. I think somewhere around 1944, thereabout. As most of these Western countries, European countries in particular, must be rehabilitated. So they were true to their ideals. But since the developing world, particularly Africa, seek to join them, then there must be a second rule. A second rule. Because we must understand that we are coming from a background where, first and foremost, we were partitioned, not for our interest, but we are partitioned for their interest. And here, the American government have to force some of them, particularly Britain, to give up these African countries. because it was looking for a way of also having a hold on the African continent. And one of the best way to do it was to have an incursion into the Anglophone countries, which Britain already had. And so, as a matter of fact, if you go and look at the historical context in which Britain gave up or gave independence to a lot of African countries, it was not because Britain actually wanted to give the independence, but because America wanted a foothold on Africa. So it was one of those countries that actually pressurized Britain to give independence to African countries. And so,
Yes.
so you can understand that they seek, and they seek resources. And Britain, why the Americans seek sphere of influence, the British seek resources to sustain their empire. Consequently, it has no choice to work with America to ensure that African interest is subjugated under the interest of the Americans. And of course, the ownership of if you look at the ownership of the Bretton Woods institutions, who really own the Bretton Woods institutions? Who dictates the tune? Who dictates the choice of the policies that must be activated? It's the Western world. So yes, they might attempt to be rational in some instances so that we see them as being rational. But the question is, are they actually rational? Are they actually acting for the interests of African countries? So that is another institution that we need to carefully look at. And that is why you find that there are some policies which work well for them in Africa. And these policies are not being executed in other countries. For instance, take a look at the policy support instrument that the IMF and the World Bank has actually made African countries to activate. How many European countries have actually activated the policies of support instruments in running their economies? How many?
Very few, very few of them, if any at all.
If any at all.
Yes. Well, because all of those countries that are keyed into those policies are third world countries.
Are third world countries.
Yes.
And majorly sub-Saharan African countries.
And of course have those terms and conditions dictated to them,
of course,
hook, line, and sinker.
You don't have a choice because the whole of your economic system is in their hands. The human capital that you require to run your economic system are proxies for them. So that's why you find that most policies that come into Africa are accepted wholesale. They are not even domesticated. Even take a look at the democracy we are talking about. You don't have the Nigerian brand of democracy, for instance, in Nigeria. The same thing in Kenya. They are all imported political systems. They're all imported political systems. And of course, our economic system, who fashioned them out? Those that have been recognized by Western institutions. And they want to be seen as being experts in those areas without looking at the peculiarities of our societies. So you can understand.
That then brings us to the whole issue of how the African elites who are in power in their various countries have been able to entrench and control the state institutions over the last 2 or 3 decades.
Yes.
Why pretending to be democratic? Why not dismantling the democratic institutions, but they have those so-called democratic institutions within their control, not just within their control, manipulated by them. How have they been able to do so without as much as a strong challenge from within and from without?
Yes, it actually has its roots in our colonial past, 1. And 2, its roots in the, what do I call it now, the Cold War. The Cold War. Don't forget, when the colonialists came in here, they make a choice of those that can represent them. Before they came in, we had kings. we have administrative system, we have political system. They dismantle those systems and then put in place people who will represent their interests. Not only put in place people who represent their interests, they develop a system in which their offspring will be recognized for further development to hold the political space after the original persons that were selected by them are gone. So to ensure continuity. That is why you find out that there are several countries in Africa where, first and foremost, there were some, like in Togo, where you find a kind of inheritance structure in place. In a place like, is it Equatorial Guinea, such things is also taking place. And in a place like Nigeria, don't also forget that such structures is gradually evolving, where you find the children of the elite. They are the only people that have the juicy positions in Nigeria, in most cases. And as they are living, they replace themselves with their children. Such structures were not built by those people. It was built by those who put them in place. And that is why you find that in most cases, change in government, for instance, in a place like Nigeria, must always have the support of an external force, external country. And that has always been the case. So these structures guaranteed the continuity of what they want to perpetuate. You know, what I call a kind of economic albatross that most African countries have actually found themselves. Political as well. So they develop a system of inheritance where the son or the daughter succeeds the father and so on and so on. Even our industrial systems are also built along those lines.
Because they are actually the ones who have the economic muscle.
To do whatever they want to do.
Yes.
And of course, they also work on the psychology of Africa and the psychology of poverty, which says starve a man. When you starve him and offer him peanuts, he will accept. That is why you see in most African countries, instead of challenging the power structure that have been entrenched, the powerful and destructive power structure that have been entrenched, they should challenge it. They prefer to go for handouts. That's the citizenry. So essentially, they've entrenched a system in Africa where you see there are no middle class. It's essentially peasants and the bourgeois. And the bourgeois has no direction. They have no direction. It's simply kleptomanic. So they steal for the sake of stealing. And then when they now go to their to those who actually structured their lives the way it is, their fear is built into them. It's built into them so that they continue to ensure that the proceeds, the revenue, and whatever assets that belongs to this African country is, I won't want to use the word repatriated because in the first instance they were taken out of Africa. You know, is packaged and sent to the colonial countries. That is one. Then two, there are instruments that must enable them, to actually facilitate the looting, the state capture, so that they can always send this, whatever they have looted from the system, into the developed world.
To serve the interests of the developed world and not that of their immediate society.
Certainly not. Because they recognize that we have a system of what I always refer to as the Rakadede culture across Africa. There's respect for elders. There's respect for wealth, which was built into us as they were handing independence to us. Because when they were here, we were worshiping them. You have that master-servant relationship. And so they built it up and identified those that we actually succeed them, and then place them in the position which they left behind. And so, but it is not just enough to place them, but you must build institutions. That is why they build strong institutions that are very, very ineffective. You know, which in name is African to an extent, or probably in education is also African, But in reality, in an action, it is not Africa. And that creates a serious problem in the governance structure.
All right, we have been joined now by Mr. Fa Elvis Tayong, who is a political analyst and publisher of Investigator newspaper, who is joining us from Bia in Cameroon. Mr. Tayong, thank you so much for joining us. What is the situation in your country at the moment? Hello, Mr. Tayong,
Well,
can you
thanks.
hear
It's
us?
my pleasure. I just hope that the connections are smooth. I don't know if you're getting me over there clearly.
Yes, please go ahead. I can hear you.
All right. Thanks. It's my pleasure joining AI, African Independent Television, live from Boya in Cameroon, which is the foot of Mount Fako. That's the highest mountain in the central West Africa, so to say. It's a pretty a worrisome aspect. I would tell you that I come from the English-speaking part of the country, and just like Boya, you have Bamenda. These were the areas that were colonized by the British and had once been the part of Nigeria, governed before the independence period. We understand that the ongoing crisis has hit this area for over 80 years now. But I'll tell you that what is transpiring shortly after this, the Constitutional Council of Cameroon proclaimed President Paul Biya as the winner ahead of the incumbent Issa Chiroma Bakari, who comes from the north. There has been a political tension. I would tell you that while we're talking today, we had a circular that was sent out by Issa Chiroma Bakari, where he had called on a nationwide strike. That is ghost towns today. That is the 31st of October. And if you want to go detailing in the parts of Douala, which is just not up to an hour drive, that's 45 minutes drive from Boya here to Douala. First thing is that the tension, we are feeling the tension here, but the crisis here is not double impact in the English-speaking part of the country, because we currently have the every Monday's ghost towns, which has to do with a handful of Anglophones revindicating the ill treatment that the French-speaking part of the country has been meting on the English part of the Cameroon. But then I would let you know that the tension today, the tension is very much felt in the French-speaking part of the country than in the English-speaking part. But the impact still spills over, because vehicles that used to leave Boya, Limbe in the southwest region, likewise Bamenda in the northwest region, down to Yaoundé, the capital of Cameroon, or Douala, the economic capital of Cameroon, there has been no circulation. And so the major towns, the major roads out of the major towns have been grounded. And business persons, if you come to Boya, where we have the popular park called My 17 Park, you realize that all the transport agencies have locked down because they don't want to take any risk of venturing probably to Douala or Yaoundé, where they may block along the way, or they might see their buses set on fire. So the tension is there. But back in Douala, early this morning, I will tell you that the governor of the Littoral region, Governor Dieudonné Ivaha Diboha, since yesterday has been going around the town and trying to convince business persons to come out en masse, to shun fear, and make sure that they should carry on with their economic activities under the grounds that they will have adequate security. In the parts of Douala like New Bell, Bonaberi itself, Bepanda, all these areas still have problems because people did not come out en masse as expected. In the same case, if you go to the west region of the country, areas like Buda, which is the capital of Bambutu's division, and Bafoussam itself, which is the capital of the west region of the country, you realize that people are still skeptical coming out. And so there is a political fear, tension in the air. And what is making matters worse is that since Tuesday, security forces in Douala and Bafoussam, just like in Yaoundé, have been going into the quarters and arresting youths. They say these youths were part of the ongoing protest that led to destructions and looting of properties. So that is further compounding and making the political atmosphere very tense. And that's the reason why you see Douala has not been very okay. the economic town that used to be buoyant, today is not buoyant as per se. And so the streets are deserted. Few commercial bikes are struggling to come out. And some parts of Ndokoti and some parts of Aqua, few persons are struggling to come out. But there's a fear factor I must meet. And so to let you know, things might get worse in the days ahead because there has been a communique from Issa Chiruma Bakari, both in English and French, which is still telling people that he's getting into phase 2 of the revendication on what he termed his stolen victory. And this communique, which is a close to 3 minutes audio rather, is letting the Cameroonians know that from Monday, the Monday itself, the 2nd, right up to Wednesday of November, he is declaring a national lockdown, what we call ghost town. And this as well as ghost towns, a phenomenon that have quite been experienced by some of us in the English-speaking part of the country. And so getting the French-speaking part, announcing ghost towns as the economic activities are gradually being paralyzed, tells us that if care is not taken, they will fully join us in the same fate where we find ourselves. So that's the situation as of now in Cameroon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Elvis Tayong. Many people in Nigeria are wondering what exactly has led to this situation at the moment. Considering the fact that Paul Biya has been in power for several decades, and over these many years, it doesn't appear as if the kind of response that is getting right now was there in the past. What is the motivation this time around? What would you say is the driving force this time around? Is it the quality or the individual that is the opposition, or it's just that many Cameroonians are fed up with what we describe in Nigeria as state capture?
The bitter truth in it is that Cameroonians, first, you know, when the Anglophone crisis was poorly managed, that is when we were still around the 2017, when the Anglophone crisis that was brought about by revendications, which was spearheaded by teachers and lawyers, you know, they were rough-handled, they were manhandled, they were brutalized, and the government was not willing to listen to them. That even led to the arrest of some key figures, like of the teachers part of it. We had Ambassador Agbobala, a lawyer, who was arrested and locked up. We equally had a handful of other teachers that fell into the dragnet of security forces. And we had Tasang Wilfred, one of the leading teachers of one of the leading leaders of the teachers strike action, who was also arrested. And the rest escaped to Nigeria and others abroad. You know, that particular aspect is what led to the Anglophone crisis. And later on, we find ourselves where they have been killing, burning, and looting.
Mr. Tayong, are you still there with us? We appear to have lost your audio there now.
But many Cameroonians are not happy with the fact that, so the problem is that many persons are
Go ahead, we can hear you. Right, we hope that you can get back with us as quickly as possible. Mr. Far Elvis Tayong is a political analyst and is a publisher of Investigator newspaper in Buea in Cameroon. Mr. Talong, we can hear you now, so please go ahead. Mr. Tayong? Yes.
Yes, I'm getting you. I'm sure it was, we had some light network interruption here.
It's expected.
But then, as I said, the people
yes.
are fed up. The people are fed up, and so they want a change. They are yearning for a change. And truth be told, the Issa Chiruma Bakari of the FNC party, who had been one-time Minister of Communication in the Biya regime, and also Minister of Employment and Vocational Training, who just resigned and put forth his candidature, became the winning team. And I will tell you that when they were putting documents to run for presidency, The real person who was supposed to be there was Professor Maurice Kamto of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement. We understand that the Constitutional Council of Cameroon disqualified him, and Cameroonians were disgruntled. So now, seeing Issa Chiroma Bakari coming in as someone who resigned from the government, it gave many Cameroonians the last hope. Those who would have relied on Professor Maurice Kamto of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement were forced to rally and give their support now to Issa Chiroma Bakari. And all of this, I would tell you, is out of frustration, because you would imagine that while they will say we have NEPA crisis in Nigeria, in Cameroon it is worst. We have the electricity company called Enio. We have a number of dam projects in the country that are not running, poor road situation, increase of fuel prices, food prices skyrocketing. I'll tell you, the standard of living is getting harder and harder for the Cameroonian community. And that's why this time, it's not only the Anglophone community that is against President Paul Biya. This time is the French-speaking part of the country in its entirety that are so against President Paul Biya. So with that frustration, they had no choice than to give their weight behind Issa Chiroma Bakari. I'll tell you, I covered the elections in a town in the southwest region known as Kumba. And that area happens to be the bastion of the ruling party, the CPDM. But surprisingly, I will tell you that Issa Chiroma Bakari won in that area. Now, what happened was that while Cameroonians were frustrated, and you see them going to the streets, is because the fraud was done in broad daylight. Now, you imagine that in the Anglophone part of the country, that's northwest and southwest region, where the crisis is hard hit, and where the separatist fighters had declared lockdown for several days ahead of the presidential election, but the election's results were truncated, and now giving President Paul Biya over 90% win in the northwest and southwest. And many even in these areas are asking, were they ghosts who voted? Where were these results? Where are these results coming from? And then you come down to the French-speaking part of it. In the main town in Douala, Issa Chiroma Bakari got it well. And even in parts of Yaoundé and the military camps, even the military themselves, from their results around their military barracks, close to the military barracks, the polling station there shows that Issa Chiroma Bakari won. But then, Cameroonians are getting more and more frustrated because the results that were proclaimed, that is few days ago, by the Constitutional Council, is what is baffling most Cameroonians. So that result, which is a far more exaggeration, given the incumbent, President Paul Biya, an overwhelming victory for the straight Cameroonians. And so most of them, many of them who are unemployed, others underemployed, were forced to join the caravan of street protests, which led to the several casualties we have. And to remind you that the frustration is even more than the way we look at it, because even though we have currently 66 deaths cut across the national territory by military firing live bullets and ammunition on the protesters, if you go to the northern region, you'll be told that 2 primary schools are said to have been set ablaze. The councils, some councils, what we call local government councils, were equally set ablaze. And even the GO's office, the local administrative officials, the GO of, we have a place called Manjo, we have another one itself called Figi. Even the GO herself was forced to escape when things went out of control. So as I speak now, the damage is still to be estimated, but it is a call for concern because, as you asked the question rightly, what caused this? The frustration itself, coupled with the exaggerated results, when many Cameroonians knew after the polling stations, after the vote cast, they knew that Issa Chiroma Bakari will bring about change. They will see a new face, a new vision for Cameroon. Their hopes were all dashed. And that is why, with that frustration, Cameroonians could not hold themselves than taken to the streets, which we say the authorities have been preaching peace. The governor in Douala, the Littoral region, has been in the marketplaces, struggling to preach peace to the few persons the governor meets there. But the days ahead are not really easy because no one could believe that we'll have ghosts, or the ghost towns featuring in the French-speaking part of the country, like in parts of Douala, Bafoussam, and even parts of Buda, as we find it today. So it's a call for concern.
Now, the question that arises from that, Mr. Talong, is this. If Mr. Issa Chiroma Bakari has been a member of the ruling party, in fact, he served as minister in that party and in that government for so many years before now, what gives the Cameroonian people the confidence and the conviction that he will be different, that his policies and his actions will be different from what Paul Biya has enunciated and practiced over these many years and these many decades that he has been in power? Is he coming with anything new from what the ruling party that he belonged to up until this election has enunciated over the years?
What you understand with Issa Chiroma Bakari is the fact that he was an opposition figure with his party known as FNNC, who had a coalition move with the ruling party, the CPDM. So they had an agreement alongside with other presidential opposition candidates like Bello Buba Maigari. And so they agreed in their memorandum of understanding to back up the ruling party in the regions. And that's why they were given ministerial positions. Now, for Issa Chiroma Bakari, I would tell you that even when he was minister, he made grievous errors that angered Cameroonians. For example, there was a massive and brutal killing in the northern region, in northwest part of Cameroon, in a place called Ngarbu, where over 18 persons were killed in cold blood. Issa Chiroma Bakari, at that time, as the government spokesman, went as far as making an press outing, saying that those video footages that came up from Ngarbu, just like some women and children who were murdered by soldiers in the far north region, presuming to be Boko Haram members, were also condemned. Issa Chiroma Bakari came up as the Minister of Communication at that time and said even those in the northern region were soldiers from Mali. And it took a lot of time with Amnesty International proving things right, but he did not make any declaration. Now, just as you asked, why are people relying on Issa Chiroma Bakari? One, they are relying on him because among all the 12 candidates, he appears to be the only last resort, which means the only that Cameroonians felt that they could manage out of the bunch of the other devils, in quotes. And that's the reason why Cameroonians said, though our choice was more of the most popular opposition figure, known as Professor Maurice Kamto, but who was eliminated in the presidential race, they now turned now to Issa Chiroma Bakari. And while looking at Issa Chiroma Bakari, as I said, he went to Bamenda, and to all the areas he went to, he apologized. And he told Cameroonians that they should forgive him for his outings against the people because he was acting as the communication minister who was simply relaying government information to the people. That particular outing and acts of why he should be forgiven drew the attention of many Cameroonians, and they fell in love with him as a politician who is honest enough to come out and acknowledge the error he did before millions of Cameroonians ask for forgiveness. So Cameroonians, in that case, threw their weight behind him. The second aspect that made Cameroonians to throw their weight behind Issa Chiroma Bakari is not that he is the best candidate, it's not that there were proofs that he could deliver the goods, but just for the fact that the Cameroonians were frustrated and their renowned opposition figure was disqualified, they had to turn down as the last resort, what we call benefit of doubt, to now throw their weight on Issa Chiroma Bakari for the simple reason that they wanted to see somebody new, even if the person would be bad. And that is why one of the Roman Catholic bishops in a locality called Yagua, in one of his outings some few months ago, said it is better that the devil takes over Cameroon for the time being, then later on, Cameroonians will know what to do with the devil. Now, this particular outing of the Bishop of Yagua had gone a long way to act as a bolster to Cameroonians, to let Cameroonians know that they just needed somebody new whom they could trust just a little. whom they could trust just a little. And by trusting that person just a little, they could now go a long way to prefer him first. Then they will now see what to do with him if he's not giving them what they want later on. It's the driving force of why Cameroonians had to give their weight behind Issa Chiruma Bakari.
Well, before I let you go, I just need you to quickly relate this and compare with the situation we have in Cameroon today with what is happening in Ivory Coast and in Tanzania, where just 2 days ago there was an election or something that looked like an election, and as is happening in Cameroon, there are also street protests on the streets of Dar es Salaam and many parts of Tanzania, and the complaint appears to be the same, that election, just like what happened in Cameroon, was stolen.
Yes, I would tell you that President Paul Biya, the president of Tanzania, and Alassane Dramane Ouattara of Ivory Coast, all of them are triplets. We could say triplets born of the same mother and father, because they have the same dictatorial spirit in them. And so if we are comparing this, there is a whole lot of similarity. Similarity in the sense that all of them are acting unconstitutional. One, constitutional means they take upon themselves, they arrogate the power to themselves. And you would understand that while doing this, they ruled with the popular saying in the French Revolution by Louis XVI, where he said, "L'État, c'est moi." It means the state is me. Now, this is the same iron fist that these leaders are ruling their own people. So comparative-wise, what we find in Cameroon is the same thing in Ivory Coast, the same thing in Tanzania. Second point of view is that the similarity is the fact that these particular persons have gone a long way to eliminate their main challengers. If you come to Cameroon, the main challenger of this election, who would have been able to put down PM, was Professor Maurice Kamto of the MRC party. Unfortunately, they played their jigsaw puzzle game and eliminated him before Issa Chiruma Bakari came in. And they underestimated Issa Chiruma Bakari, not knowing that with the frustration of Cameroonians, they had to weigh in behind the devil they would prefer than the angel they don't even know. Now, it's the same thing in Ivory Coast. If you look at it, Laurent Gbagbo was equally disqualified, and then his wife, Madame Gbagbo, allowed to run. Because Alassane Ouattara knew that Madame Gbagbo will not likely get the popularity and the charisma that that Gbagbo himself. And so with that fear, you see the same. If you go to Tanzania, now the female president herself, likewise, to remove the opposition leaders and imprison them. The only reason was because she imprisoned all the political opposition figures and then had to run in as an individual candidate. So you could imagine that with all what we're saying here, all of them are triplets, but the mother and that is the father of anti-democracy. That's why you see the way the things are moving the way they are. Now, look at the characteristics. The same street protests, looting, destruction we have in Cameroon, the same thing is in Ivory Coast. The same destruction, looting, and burning in Ivory Coast is the same thing in Tanzania. And all of these are spearheaded by the majority who are disgruntled youths, who are frustrated, so to say. And so at the end of it, you realize that these three countries have a common bond, anti-democratic devil, and that's what is driving them to where we are today. And the bad thing, as we said, is that if the protest was taking place without loss of lives, it would have been better. But just as you see, the security officers will always fire live ammunition to deter the protesters. And at the end, you have casualties, which comes into play, which is a call for concern. So in real terms, I think that all in all, these countries are sharing something in common. And what they all have in common is the fact that they have decided to act unconstitutional. And that's the reason why they are determined to cling on to power in concern, irrespective of the consequences. And I think that the lessons we learn from these dictatorial regimes clean across Tanzania, Ivory Coast, and Cameroon is the fact that they are not willing to let go power, meaning they will prefer people to die and they stay in power, living power, and sparing people's life. So with all in all, it has proven equally that the military we have and the security who take their oaths, promising to protect lives and properties of persons, it failed because they are supporting the dictatorial regime against the wish of the people. And that explains why you will find them find live ammunitions on protesters who are angry for the fact that the presidents themselves are staying in power unconstitutional. So all of these are worries, and that's why sometimes some Cameroonians will even say that how they wish Nigeria. But every country has its own problems. But that of Cameroon, that of Tanzania, and that of Ivory Coast is a burning issue. And I will tell you, over there in Nigeria, the saddest thing is that you still get some dictatorial presidents wishing and congratulating a 22+ year president. You start asking yourself, if you go to the Yoruba land, you go to the Igbo land, you could imagine that parents who are even 70 years of age sometimes are catered for by their children. Talk less of 80, they become the wise people in the village. People come and consult them for the history of the village and to tell them some words of wisdom. But imagine manning a country at that age. You start asking yourself, is this really a normal phenomenon? That at 92+, someone is at the helm of controlling over 30 million inhabitants. And the worst of it, I'll tell you, is that if President Paul Biya was even making life better for the people, as we find Obiang Gemen Bazogo of Equatorial Guinea, who has stayed long in power, but giving people what they want, I'm sure we'll not be where we are. So the bad thing is that you stay in power, at the same time, you milk the people and make them suffer. So those are the worries we have, actually. It's a very sad situation in Cameroon.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Faye Elvis Tayong, for your insights into the developments in Cameroon. I have with me in the studio Professor Akungo Abramwe Amadasun, who is a professor of public administration and political economy, and I just want him to weigh in on these developments, taking the little time we have left to look at the developments in Cameroon, in Cote d'Ivoire, and Tanzania, and of course, the expectation of what is to come in Uganda, and in many of these other countries where you have had constitutional amendments and term limit extensions as a tool for clinging on to power by those who are in power and for, as it were, capturing state institutions.
Yes, my worry here is that these countries are likely to slide into chaos. And like all other African countries that have, where the presidents, the rulers of these countries have actually clinged on to power, and then it slide into chaos, the economy will run into shambles. 1. 2, they are likely to come up with ethnic divide, knowing fully well that a lot of these countries are not made up of one ethnic group. They are likely to come up with it. And so that will further compound the crisis. 3, they are also likely to start trying to bring in foreign interest. And what this means is that at the end of the day, state resources, instead of being put into developing each of these nations, might be used in financing foreign interest in an attempt to, or foreign economy in an attempt to stay onto power. By the time these states comes out of this crisis, obviously they will be in a worse situation that they were, because a lot of the state resources will have been looted or destroyed in the process. 1. 2, the opponents might also be seeking both internal and external support. And in an attempt to do that, might negotiate the future of the country, even when they come to power. We've seen this all over Africa. It happened in Uganda when Milton Nyerere came. Milton Nyerere's second coming to power, he almost mortgaged the country to Tanzania's interest. Because like we know, it was then under Julius Nyerere that Milton Obote was returned back to Uganda. And at that stage, it then means that there were military confrontations. Arms have to be bought, youths have to be recruited, and of course, Tanzania sent in its troops into Uganda. But of course, Tanzania wouldn't have done that without the assurance that it would recoup the funds.
Whatever investment
it was making to return him back to power. That's it's a very terrible scenario that might likely occur. Then again, in an attempt to ensure that the incumbent, the despotic incumbent, is removed from power, there might be large-scale destruction of the country's infrastructure, both economic and physical. There might be large-scale, and so replacing them might be you might now have to again mortgage the country with either foreign interests or even internal interests that are serving as proxies to other interests. If you take Nigeria, for instance, we fought a civil war. At the end of the civil war, we brought in a lot of countries to assist us. But what happened next? We have to pay back. We have to pay back what we use in the ammunitions and so on and so forth. And of course, that was the beginning, actually, of the downfall of Nigeria, because the Nigerian political system became exposed. And then there was competition, which is likely also to happen in these countries, because there might be alliance. But for now, we have three major powers that are struggling to take over Africa.
So very quickly, Prof, what does the future hold for democracy in Africa, given these trends that we see today?
I really, honestly speaking, I really do not see any future.
For democracy?
For democracy. Because what we call democracy is not democracy. It's, according to Fela, it's demo madness.
Demonstration of grace.
Demonstration of grace. That is what it is. So the structures are not there. And across Africa, from north to west to east to, north to south, east to west, there's massive looting. And there's massive distrust of government. And the sad aspect of it all is that the youth who are to take over have imbibed that culture of looting. So even when they come to power, because of the culture in which they grew up, despotism and state capture, they are likely to continue in that same trend.
That's a very bleak picture. That
it is.
You paint here, Prof.
It is. But the only thing we need to do is that we should actually start by ensuring that those who are in the opposition start to preach value changes. Our societal value changes that is built on the past, pre-colonial past, because they were actually values that kept us together as a people.
Thank you so much, Prof. I wish we had a lot more time to explore that angle. But Professor Akongbowa Bramwell Amadasun is a professor of public administration and political economy. He teaches at the Federal University in Wukari. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
for
so
coming on the program. And of course, we are joining us from Buea in Cameroon, Elvis Tayong, who is a political analyst and the publisher of Investigator newspaper, giving us an up-to-date situation report of what is happening in Cameroon, just days after the election that declared 92-year-old Paul Biya winner again after several decades in power. Well, thank you so much for investing your time with us. See you again when we bring you another edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.